Welcome. Thanks for joining me on the Gravity Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's start at the beginning. Let's hop right in. I want
Okay.
to hear. I know you've got a really full and rich story, and excited to get to know you. And I'm really enjoying seeing what you're doing today. But
Mm.
I want to really share the path to your work today. And start at the beginning by just telling me a little bit about kind of your childhood, your upbringing, and where you're
Mm.
from, and your family dynamics, and all that
All the good
crazy
stuff.
stuff.
Yeah, the good stuff. Yeah. So originally Pittsburgh, Steubenville area, that's where like my parents are,
Mhm,
half Pittsburgh area, half in Eastern Ohio, and um kind of bounced around city life in the regular school year and country life in the summers. I got shipped out all the time when I was a kid to my hillbilly relatives, I say, to work on a farm and everything, which was great. I don't think there's anything quite like autonomy for a kid than just being allowed to wander in the woods alone, which I
mhm,
was granted, which was awesome for me.
mhm.
Especially, my neighborhood where I was at was pretty a little rough socioeconomically. That was I was in the tail end of like the crack AIDS epidemic and everything. So,
Mhm,
that was very prevalent in the neighborhood I was in. So, getting to escape that a little bit was good.
mhm.
And what else? I don't know. And then we moved up here.
Well, tell me just
Yeah,
before you get
yeah.
into, next, what were you like as a kid? I mean, tell me a little bit
Mm.
more about kind of, your parents, your family, what you were like, what you remember about, being a kid.
Yeah. I was a stubborn, kind of bullheaded kid, too smart for my own good in the situation, very challenging to all the adults around my life. I thought I
Mhm,
knew better than a lot of them. And that got me in a lot of trouble as a
mhm,
kid, ornery. Family dynamics, a lot in, not my immediate family. My parents had a relatively good marriage. There was a lot of volatility with like arguing and fighting and not enough money. There was always resource fighting all the
mhm,
time. But a lot of my ancillary family, outside of it, there's a history of drug and alcohol abuse, domestic violence, violence in general. I got
mhm,
uncles that are were part of motorcycle gangs and lived in that world and in and out of prison and a lot of that. So that was very, that aesthetic was very visual to me
mhm.
growing up, very
Mhm.
prevalent.
Mhm. And what do you remember about kind of, how that, what you thought about that? Was there something that, was scary? Was it, kind of have some, I don't know, was some appeal to it, the
Yeah.
motorcycle
Oh
thing? I mean,
yeah.
tell me, what was it like when you were a kid just being around all that?
And when I'm a kid, it was weird because I would spend some time with my grandma, my dad's mom, after school, and that was one my two uncles that were really like basically in and out of jail my whole
Mhm.
life. So every once in a while, they'd call, and they were on the West Coast or wherever the hell they were in
Mhm.
jail or whatever it was. And so we'd get these talk to your uncle, he's in prison. I'm like,
Mhm.
all right, that's strange, but
Mhm.
they didn't quite understand what was going on. And then when he would come around, yeah, they would come in. We'd go to family reunion, there'd be 40 or 50 motorcycles just pull up to family
Mhm.
reunion.
Mhm.
And that's exciting as a kid. I mean, that kind of got
Mhm.
the hook in me from motorcycle riding, which is a big passion of mine throughout
Mhm.
my whole life. But yeah, that dynamic was strange, and I think anyone that has any family that's gone through that, in and out of incarceration, it's a weird feeling, like
Mhm.
a connect/disconnect with your
Mhm.
own people and
Mhm.
your family. So
Yeah, and so tell me, aside from seeing the motorcycles, which I'm actually curious about because I happen to like motorcycles too. I don't ride because I had a motorcycle in college that I put down, went over the handlebars, and that got me to stop for a long time. And now, as an adult, I've been kind of flirting with it again, but yeah, it's not real popular at home.
yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, just tell me like a little bit more about like what were you into,
Oh
just
yeah,
kind of as you
yeah.
were starting to maybe even move to Columbus, like what were your interests? What were you taking interest in at that time?
Yeah, a lot of it, I kind of fell into what. came natural with what my family wanted. That was a lot of athletics. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
athletics in our family,
Yeah.
sport. Growing up in Pittsburgh and Ohio, or Pennsylvania, Ohio, you play football and wrestle and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I got into that, but I never, I don't know how to explain. It was always a means to an end to me. Like if
Mm-hmm.
I did that, people left me alone to do what I wanted to do, and
Mm-hmm.
that was, a lot of my creative side.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, a lot of that led to, uh, I don't know how to just say it, but I mean, I was not very good. Like I sold a lot of drugs, I sold
Mm-hmm.
guns. I was really on a
Mm-hmm.
on a different kind of path.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that was due to the fact that I wasn't engaged in the world that other people wanted me to be engaged in.
Mm-hmm.
So I found outlets that weren't always the most productive.
Mm-hmm. How old were you when you were doing that?
I'd say it's probably started at like 13, 14,
Yeah.
that age.
And
Yeah.
and how much of that do you think was influenced by, the what you were seeing around
Yeah.
you with your uncles and that kind of stuff? And then how much of it is like, and it's hard to say exactly. I mean, you were a kid, but just in hindsight, this idea that, you couldn't really maybe go towards the outlets that felt like who you really were.
No, probably 50-50. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of it, yeah, is family. I grew up in, I'm not gonna, most of my family's working class people. They were steel workers, iron workers, that kind of stuff. But the other ones that weren't were
Mhm.
definitely, they were into crime and
Mhm.
violence, and that was how they made it. And there was no like, I guess there wasn't stigmas to that. I was just like, well, this is how it happens.
Mhm.
I grew up seeing a lot of violence, so that's
Mhm.
just what happens. That's how you solve problems. That's how you
Mhm.
resolve it. That's how you make money. It's not a
Mhm.
big deal. So, and then being in the neighborhood, growing up on the south side of Columbus, it's very prevalent there. It's
Mhm.
just part of culture.
Mhm.
You know, it's it was weird to me. I remember going to college and when I just assumed everyone sells drugs. You sell a
Mhm.
little weed or you sell some pills, sell some coke. That's just
Mhm.
what you do.
Mhm.
And they're
Mhm.
like, no, that's not what you
Mhm.
do. But like
Mhm.
that's just the culture we grew up in. That was just an expectation. It wasn't.
Mhm.
It was a
It's
normalcy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I do think the culture and the environment that you're raised in, that you grow up in, can really normalize some things that are terribly unhealthy.
Yep.
You know, and it's not even like they're not normal. It's like, well, not in that world. And by the way, those worlds are probably more prevalent than people want to acknowledge.
Very true.
There are a lot of environments where that is the norm,
Hmm.
and especially if you're young, and you just don't know any better. That's all
Yeah.
you see. You're gonna live right into that,
Hmm.
which is a real systemic problem.
Yeah. I mean, until I really sought out therapy in my mid and late 30s, I didn't understand the nature of violence
Hmm.
really in an acute way until it was kind of explained to me and I processed it
Hmm.
through therapy. And
Hmm.
and that was eye opening
Hmm.
to realize like how much you push down and how much you normalize things that shouldn't be normal to the human experience.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I want to talk about that, but tell me a little bit first.
Yeah.
You said you went to college, and I'm kind of curious, how you bridge that gap from, being a 13-year-old and, I'm imagining through middle school, high school that you're selling drugs, guns, kind of up to all kinds of trouble, but you must be doing academically
It was
well
good.
enough to go to college. You still had
Uh,
aspirations that college was where you saw yourself.
yeah, that was the strange thing. So my dad, he did his graduate work in economics, and that was an expectation put on us. There wasn't other
Hmm.
alternatives. Like you're going to college,
Yeah.
so I think the expectations that always was with me. And then I was lucky enough, I was good at football. I was really good at
Mhm.
football, really good at track. Had opportunities outside of that. Um, and quite candidly, I got good grades. It was so easy for me, but I got good grades and did those things as people left me alone. I
Mhm.
figured if I played that role for them, they
Mhm.
would let me do the role that I wanted to do, which
Mhm.
was the other things.
Right. You get to college and you have a bit of an eye-opening experience where
Yeah.
you realize, this isn't the norm. Um, Tell me about that kind of phase of your life. Like what happens there, and how does that,
Yeah.
kind of shift things for you?
Well, funny. I mean, I went to University of Dayton, which is fairly affluent. So that was my first kind of foray into an affluent world or community. And I remember when I showed up to football camp. I'm a white guy, and they didn't understand it. I mean, I had cornrows and braids in my hair
Mm.
from what we did. I had a
Mhm.
girl in my neighborhood set
Mhm.
me up before I took off, and they were like, "What the fuck is this?" Like, they
Mhm.
didn't
Mhm.
understand what I was. So I didn't understand kind of their world, and it was good. Those dichotomies clashing for me really got me exposed. Now I had to, deal with some very ignorant comments
Mhm.
and some racist shit and some
Mhm.
things called out on that. But for the vast majority, people were just as curious to me as I was of their culture, and
Mhm.
I started bridging that gap and the realization that um, these people suffer from some expectations put on them the same way I
Mhm.
did. They may have resources, but their brains are still in the same place where they're trying to live up to a certain standard sometimes that they can't achieve.
And
That
you
yeah,
recognize
I
that?
recognize
Yeah,
it.
you
Yeah,
saw
really,
that. Yeah.
because I knew the pain. I mean, that
Yeah.
empathy. I don't know if I had a
You
sense of
you saw
empathy, but
yourself in them.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
saw it. Yeah,
That's pretty powerful. That is like how we change,
yeah.
when you can see that.
Yeah, I mean, at first I had a giant chip on my shoulder. I was just
Yeah.
like, "Fuck these Richies, man! They're assholes. They don't want to treat me anything."
Yeah.
And then you get drunk a few times,
You get to
and
know
you get to
somebody.
know somebody, and they're
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, man, this sucks. I don't want to. What
Right.
the fuck? I'm doing shit for my dad. I don't want to do.
Right.
I don't want his law firm. I don't want to be the CEO of a stupid company.
Right.
There's something I want to chase, but I'm
Yeah.
trapped in this existence." And I felt for him because it was like, man, there were days that all I felt was trapped in my own existence. I'm like, man, how do I get out of here?
Mhm.
And I would do anything to get out of that
Mhm.
existence. So there was that kinship that I could feel,
Mhm.
which was new to me.
Yeah, I
I
bet.
never, because in my world, socioeconomically, rich people are enemies. They're just assholes. They're out to
Mhm.
get you. They're the
Mhm.
man. They're my boss. They're this
Mhm.
guy.
Mhm.
So you're taught that, and then you're taught a different relationship with money in
Mhm.
general. Like,
Mhm.
oh, that'll make you bad. That's what all the bad people
Mhm.
do, and that's what they're chasing, and they'll never be happy. I was like, I don't see happy here either.
Mhm.
So where's happy? Like,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about it on my drive here. We just met recently, and I think I felt like you were curious to get to know me because you were trying to some extent, and you can tell me how accurate this is, but to some extent, you were trying to figure out if I was one of those guys.
A little bit, yeah.
Was I
Yeah.
just one of these rich guys, who was full of shit and, out to get people? Or was I actually sincere and,
Like I
well
said,
intended,
what we talked about, I'd heard things,
Yeah.
and I wanted to see. I've been walking my path, fairly recently. We all walk our path, but then
Sure.
we finally have that moment of clarity and that awakening. Then you start really starting to align yourself with what the universe needs from you, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'd heard. I'd heard the whispers of, "Well,
Mm-hmm.
Brett's doing this. He may be this," and I'm like,
Mm.
"Well, I know commercial real estate developers."
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
No,
And
it's
that's you
fair. I
don't wake
mean,
up and you just have this kind of money to do it and resource and everything. And they're
yeah,
typically, very driven on a
sure.
very different path
Right.
path. And yeah, I was surprised. I mean, I did
Yeah.
want to know you for those reasons. I
Yeah.
was very curious of your story.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that it's like an unfair thing, too. I mean, these stories that we tell ourselves are sometimes really informed by very real data,
Yeah.
right? There are a lot of greedy real estate developers. There are a lot of, rich assholes who really, are trying to be the man and right? I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
that is true. And it's
Well,
not all true. So,
yeah.
to kind of be able to have an opportunity as you're in college to peel that back a little bit and start to kind of,
Yeah.
get more curious with people.
Well, the other side of it is, the artists down here in this community are all going to say, well, those are the bad guys infringing on what we're doing. And I think a lot of them, to my knowledge, and you can correct me, they
Mm-hmm.
reach out to you because they all want something. Like, well, he can if he says this and he can give me money for this project, he can give me
Mm-hmm.
money for that. He can do this. He's done that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be perplexed as to why you think he should solve all your problems.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's why I was like, man, people got to come to him every goddamn day. And the sad thing is, I've known very wealthy people through
Mm-hmm.
my walks of life in different circles that I've done, and they're trapped and never having no idea who to trust, who to believe in, what's true,
Mhm.
because people are coming at them all the
Mhm.
time with
Mhm.
whatever they are and
Mhm.
never looking through the vantage point of their experience uh, as to what do you need, you know? And I
Mhm.
didn't. I was like, man, I hope everyone doesn't come at him
Mm.
like that. And that's why, I mean, honestly, I was
Mm.
curious. I just wanted to know
Yeah.
your story.
No,
Yeah.
and you made that clear. I mean, I like I said, I felt like you were, wanting to be, curious with me, and you were really wanting to actually get a chance to know me, and I appreciate that. It was a good chance for us to get to know each other,
Sure.
and that's maybe just kind of as a separate tangent here. I mean, I like being a part of this community. I like really just being in community in general. I've been talking a lot about this on the podcast. I think community is defined by the universe,
Yeah.
right? It's the ultimate
There you
community, and
go.
we're all just kind of breaking it down into our own little, pieces of that. And this community in particular feels very much connected to the big universe community because I like the energy of it, the spirit of creatives, of hardworking artists, people that are actually interested in fully expressing themselves. That to me is what drew me here.
Yeah.
And so to get a chance to meet people like you that are in the neighborhood that are actually creating really cool shit is fun
Well, do
for
you
me.
feel you're removed from the creative? I mean, I guess when our conversations, every aspect of this existence has some form of creativity. And whether your vision is executing some of the buildings around or whatever you are trying to do and protect it,
Hmm.
there's a creative process in that. I
Mm,
don't think there should ever be a divide. I think there and that I think is bad for the human experience, individual human experience, to put a divide in your creativity. You
mhm.
need that to survive.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. That and I've talked about this too, and Rick Rubin talks about it.
Mm.
That the um, creativity can exist in anything and everything, and
Mm.
it does. Right, we're creating our lives, whether we like them or not. We're always in creation. So I feel very connected to that. But the my comment about this community and the broader community
Mm.
is I haven't always felt connected, right?
Gotcha.
I have felt separation in the
Mm.
past, and part of it, and I want to, come back to some things that you said, was because I didn't feel safe or I didn't feel confident enough. I'll
Yeah.
even just take responsibility for it. I didn't have enough confidence in who I was to just be in the world
Hmm.
as I am,
Hmm.
right? And when you're not safe or you don't feel comfortable for whatever reason
It's hard to exist.
expressing yourself,
Yeah.
that divide is going to be there. You're
Hmm.
separate from, right?
Yeah.
Now, you're always part of it,
Yeah.
but right, you don't feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. People. I've had other people ask me, "What's like your favorite project? Like, what are you most excited for right now?" And I always try to answer them, and I know they think I'm some wackadoodle, but I'm
Mm,
like, existence.
mm,
I walk in this space to exist. The
mm,
things around me are manifestations of that, but I
mhm.
walk in the space I do to exist.
Yeah,
That's my project.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, let's back up
Okay.
because you've come to that place, but it doesn't sound like you were always there. And what I was curious about is through high school, through college, there's a part of you that you are not really um, expressing. It's not
Yeah.
who you're being, and you're finding these other things to kind of like deal with the fact that you don't really want to be where you are,
Yeah.
and you're not really being who you actually are.
Hmm.
And so, what I'm curious about is who was that you actually were that you weren't expressing? What was it? Who was it?
It was this. I
Yeah.
mean, I was where I'm at now is who I always felt I was.
Yeah.
But, I came out of college and I had this responsibility. I'm like, everyone sacrificed for me to get here. From my
Mhm.
economic level, I made it out. I got a good education, good opportunity. I better make the most of this, follow the path, do what's expected of me so that I can provide for myself, maybe put a family together. So just fell into a corporate role,
Mm.
engineering kind of sales. I'm like, all right, this
Mhm.
is good enough. And
Mhm.
then I had 4 years where I would break free of that. I started an independent record label when I was in Chicago and St. Louis, and I'm like, oh, this is great. I'd laugh because it was one of the biggest failures of my life. Lost every dime I had, and it was the most glorious year I had in my life.
That was a full-time gig?
Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah,
you left
I
the
left
yeah.
it. Yeah, when I was 25, almost 26 for a
Mhm.
year, and yeah, I said I got to do this.
Mhm.
My parents like, you're going to starve. You're not here in Columbus. We can't take care of you. You got to
Mhm.
figure it out. And I'm like, but I knew that inside, like this wasn't me. So I had
Mhm.
that little breaking point. It failed, and I went back to what I knew, and
Mhm.
kind of back to the business world, um, and did that for a number of years until I had another epiphany where I'm like, we're constantly trying to search for what we are. Decided to run for political office. I had a lot of
Mhm.
friends in that world, and started gaining allies, and really got training. And I'm like, yeah, this is good. I
What
look,
was yeah, tell me
yeah,
what was I mean, it's fascinating to
oh
me
yeah,
because you have such a wide range of experience in this journey. And I in talking to you kind of see how it all has led you to where you
yeah,
are, right? I mean, you're using all of it. But which is the thing that I love the most, right? When I see people that are just using all this
yeah.
experience to create from this place that you're in now. But what was it that drew you to politics?
I got it wasn't the political process and that it was I seriously, when I came back to Columbus, I moved right back down the south side where I knew. And I looked at Parsons Avenue where I grew up, and it looked the exact same it did 30 years ago when I was a kid. And I heard so many politicos, so many people, and I don't want to throw them under the bus, but so many from the Democratic Party would come around every single year, and they're going to tell me how you give me this vote, I'm going to make it better. It wasn't better.
Hmm.
And it wasn't, and I don't think they understood even, most politicians don't even understand what the people really need. I think some do. But for us, I was trying to explain to them, we need economic opportunities. I don't need handouts. I need people to have hope through a job and a purpose. And I wish that some of those entities could put that in their life. And I know that politicians are limited to what they can and can't do, but you can be an agent of change in those neighborhoods. You can use political power and capital to make those changes outside of what you can do at the state house. And I think it's vastly more important. My idea was like I can do for the people on my south side. Like I look around, I'm like, I have the skill set that I can change. I
Hmm.
can speak the language of business and entrepreneurship. I can speak the language of my own people, where we come from, and explain to them what this is going to mean. Um, Unfortunately, at that time, I couldn't speak the political language because I,
Hmm.
I was too candid,
Mm.
somewhat abrasive
Hmm.
in my speech and my manner, and
Hmm.
that's not going to get you a lot of friends in political world. You
Hmm.
have to be very
Hmm.
savvy and tactful.
Interesting. So
Mm.
you really were coming at it from a place of actually wanting to make a change.
That's it.
It was
Yeah,
personal. You cared about this neighborhood,
yeah,
and you thought that would be the way
yeah,
that maybe you could really make a difference.
yeah.
And so yeah, you might have lacked some of the political skills, but that by itself is kind of interesting because I can get that like there's certain ways to communicate that are more likely to work, right?
Yeah.
On the other hand, like I'm curious a little bit about the politics, right? That part kind of bothers me a bit, right? That you have to be a politician in order to become a politician, and
Yeah.
sure, maybe you're abrasive, but like, is that really what matters?
They're political parties.
Yeah,
It's their party.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that people have to understand from the outside, it's more of a club than it is a party or a democracy. It is really truly. You've got to build coalitions inside of it and tactfully get allies. And a lot of times, to be quite candid, and I don't know, I'll probably get in trouble for saying it, but they don't care what's going on the outside. I've had
Yeah.
internal meetings where they're just like, I don't care what citizens need. Like,
Mhm.
I would sit down and with some of the more powerful ones trying to get allies. They're like, I don't care. What
Mm.
can you do for me? Like literally.
Mhm.
And it felt
Mhm.
like the slimiest situation I've ever
Mhm.
been in. And I was
Mhm.
like, you people think business people are slimy. And I've never heard the kind of dialogue and the conversations in my professional business life, the 20 years I did that I had the 2 years that were in the political rooms.
Mhm.
So it just and more, I'm grateful. I'm grateful I had that experience, but I'm very grateful that I lost. I got my ass kicked in the primary.
Mhm.
Loved it because again, I'm one of those weirdos that likes failure
Mhm.
in a
Mhm.
weird sense. I mean, not
Mhm.
like, man, I just love losing everything, but I
Right.
know the best amount of lessons can be learned the quickest in
Yeah,
some of
you
our failures.
embrace it. You don't
Yeah.
let it take you down and you
Uh-uh.
just kind of learn and move
Yeah.
on. So tell me a little bit about, you talked about therapy, you talked about learning about violence, you
Uh,
talked about some epiphanies along the way. What really shakes you, that wakes you up, that has you kind of start to really look at yourself and figure out, how you want to start to be in the world?
yeah. So unfortunately, it was the demise of my first marriage, and that divorce. And the weird thing is, not weird, I guess, but I felt really bad because I put so much on my ex-wife, the expectations. So, me escaping poverty at some degrees and escaping my own past and really trying to work this past. So, I started in my mid 20s, late 20s, really doing a lot of community work. I was big with Habitat Humanity, Big Brothers Big Sisters, because in my brain I thought I could buy my soul back for a lot
Mm,
of the evil things that I had done when I was
mm-hmm,
younger. So I put all this work in, tried to become this different person, this very much more gentle version of myself. And it all culminated with me finding this woman whom I loved more than anything, any human at the time. And I thought, well, this is the reward. I get
mm-hmm,
to have this experience. But I didn't accept her as just a wife. Like she was my salvation, my Jesus Christ, my
mm,
mentor, my everything.
mm-hmm,
And that's not fair to put on another human being. So we tried as hard as we could to stay married. I mean,
mm,
and some things fell apart. And in that divorce process, I finally had basically a mental collapse and
mm,
breakdown where, you know, attempted suicide and really dark place, depression, that whole deal. Where from rising there, and to her credit, my ex-wife actually was the one who said, I'll find you a therapist.
mm,
In the process of our divorce, she's like, I want you to get help. I want you to be good.
mm-hmm.
And I started that process of therapy to pull myself out of that and understanding of more who I was.
Mhm. Were
Yeah.
you in like a I mean, I'm just, imagining, I think it's
Yeah.
probably pretty obvious that, if you're at the point of, the brink of suicide, um, you're at a rock bottom,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people, less today, but are probably, people that grew up in the South Side, people that grew up, around, uncles like you had, they're pretty resistant to therapy.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So you imagining you're in a place that's just like desperation now that you're
Yeah.
open to starting to talk to somebody.
Yeah, like you were saying. So, that omerta, that Irish omerta, and we have some Native American blood in us where it's just like you don't talk about these issues. You
Mhm.
drink these issues away or you do some drugs to get these issues away. That's what men do. So yeah, that was just not a part of the blueprint to what we were. But funny enough, that was actually the first film project that I produced on my own. Through that process, when I came out of it and talked to my therapist about it, but we made a short doc about the mental health and how we use motorcycle riding as a coping mechanism.
Mm.
So that brought me into this career where I was like, it was weird. I put a camera in front of my family members' faces, and it's like they started saying everything we were supposed to say to each other for 3 generations.
Mm.
A lot of pain. It was
Mhm.
her worst, like 5 emotional days of my life going through that.
Fascinating. Well,
Yeah.
let me back up for a
Okay.
second. So what had you in therapy? If I'm not sure if I totally
Yeah.
understood that, but what had you decide to pick up the camera?
That was one of those, aha shower moments,
Mhm.
when you have this clarity. I Had an idea, had no idea how I'd execute it. I had no friends film. I had no idea, no producers, no directors, no anything. I just literally started breathing that idea into existence, started telling my friends about it, family members, "Hey, I got this idea I wanna do." By happenstance, maybe within the month, and this is where I know how the universe really works. When it's supposed to be, it will come to you and it will come fast and furious. Within a month, someone said, "Yeah, I got a friend who just got back from LA. He's a director.
Mhm.
Let's set up something with you."
Mhm.
He texted him. This guy came down to the bar at Press Grill
Mhm.
like within 15 minutes,
Mhm.
and he's talking to me, and he's like, "Tell me the story of this," and I start telling him, and then he's like, "Shut the fuck up, shut up, shut up." I'm like,
Mhm.
"I don't know you, dude. Like, I'm
Mhm.
about to hit you in the face. Like, what are you talking about?" He's
Mhm.
like, "You gotta save it for camera." He's like, "This
Mm.
is too much."
Mhm.
He's like, "We can't replicate this." So then I had the confidence to say, "Well, shit, maybe I do have something here that we haven't talked about or resonated with him."
Mhm.
Within 3 weeks, we had a production schedule. We're filming.
Mm.
We had it all set. So
And I guess, just one more question
yeah,
about the therapy piece, because I do want to jump into that film experience. Tell me, what was it like for you to now start to share yourself in therapy? And how hard was it
sure.
initially? And just, yeah, tell me a little bit about what that was like for you.
Very difficult. Again, another aspect of where I come from is and this is was very true with, like I said, the friends I met in college is who do you trust
Mm-hmm.
and who is trying to manipulate you. I mean, that's a real thing is like the mind fuck of life in general when people are coming at you. So when I would get into therapy, I was always guarded, jaded, and then I would try to outthink and outwit and outmaneuver my
Mm-hmm.
therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 of them were just like, "Go, like,
Mm-hmm.
you're good," and they would tell me, "You're good, you've compartmentalized this thing, you're fine, you're that."
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, "Fuck you, dude, then you don't know me,
Mm-hmm.
you didn't even take the time to know me, you didn't try." And then I had one lady, who eventually became my therapist, and she was like, "Listen, I know you're smarter than me.
Mm-hmm.
You can manipulate and you can think it through and you can twist me any way you want to." She's like, "But how do you heal from that?
Mm-hmm.
What do you care? Then don't do it. Then
Mm-hmm.
go the path you wanna go." I
Mhm.
was like, "All right, this lady gets it." And that
Mhm.
was, really started opening up
Mm.
about a lot of the pain and the
Mhm.
situations, and she never it was great. She would and I think that's what a good therapist does, and there's no answers there. There's a guidance, and she would just guide me until I was ready to read a particular book, and then because
Mhm.
that's how I register things. I have to read something and let it formulate in my own
Mhm.
mind. I have to sell myself on my own idea, which I'm sure a lot of humans are like
Mhm.
that. But she would guide me in the way I needed to, for until now, every once in a while, refresh, yeah.
Was there a book? Was there one that, just kinda comes up, as I ask the question that really hit you?
Codependency. I can't remember
Mm.
the name of the book, but I
Mhm.
had severe amount of codependency
Mhm.
in my marriage, and it destroyed everything it was about.
Mhm.
It was good.
Melanie, Beatty, I think, wrote a lot about codependency. I used to follow
Yeah.
her daily readers. Yeah, that's a big one. Okay. So, yeah, let's fast forward a little bit to this first film.
Okay.
Um, because I'm imagining, you're healing now, you're doing this work, you're in
Yeah.
therapy, you're working on yourself, you're looking at stuff,
Yeah.
and, universe brings you director, you got cameras now,
Yeah.
and you want to go to your family first. There's obviously a story there that's your story and their
Yep.
story. So it feels like a potentially very healing experience for everybody involved. Is that what happens?
Eventually.
Yeah.
But, what was going on with a lot of my family members at the time, we had 3 of us actually going through divorces all at the same time and different levels and ways that they were dealing with it. Um, so that was difficult, and then for the first time, I was opening up and telling my family members actively that I had attempted suicide and that I was now seeking therapy. That was extremely difficult because none of us would talk about it. And no one in my family would believe that was me because a lot of them saw me as the strongest individual. They would call me and ask me for advice. They would say, "And what have you read that would make sense to me right here?" And I had this like sage like zen to them, so they didn't understand that I what I went through, and then I couldn't be that person for them anymore because I had to go through my own shit. I had to face my father, and tell him about that for the first time. And he had a brother that one of his brothers actually attempted suicide and was in a mental institution for a while because of it. And when they handled it like that, it wasn't handled the same
Mm-hmm.
way in the 70s. So that was very difficult. And then a lot of my cousins started opening up and talking about the domestic violence. And
Mm-hmm.
above all the things, that we saw, alcohol abuse and narcotics and all the violence, the domestic violence really shatters you as a kid because through all that stuff, the women in our lives, my aunts, my mom, were always the guiding light. They were always love to us.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going to family functions and seeing like black eyes but concealer with the black eyes and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that, and like, "Oh, what the hell's going on?" And knowing what's going on and then seeing it, and watching in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we had to talk about that, and then we needed to talk about it, but that's really hard stuff to
Mm-hmm.
talk about. And
Mm-hmm.
it was just weird how I set out to do interviews on one specific thing, and then everyone was like, "Nope, we need to talk about this stuff." And we
Mm-hmm.
started
Mm.
really getting into those
Wow.
issues.
Yeah, I give you a lot of credit. I mean, very courageous. Would imagine that, that was not well received by everybody involved.
No,
Yeah.
no, no. I mean, my actually the weirdest thing, a lot of my aunts were like, "I don't want some of that content on there. Can you please
Mm.
not show that?"
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, "Yeah, but you went through this. Like,
Mm.
you had to go through this."
How did you handle that?
I have respected, we're just remastering that project, and we're getting it ready for the Cinema Columbus Fest here. So we're actually going to redo that. And I've honored most of their wishes, but I've also reached out to my cousins who endured that. And I've
Mm-hmm.
said, "What do you want me to do?" And they've all said, "I want my story told." Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's,
Mm-hmm.
I lived through it. I understand that it may be wrong for them, but I should have a voice too. And there's part of me that's the title of it's called Cycle Breakers. And if we can't even talk about this, we can never get to a path where we actually stop the cycle of what we are and what we become,
Mm-hmm.
and how it may help others. I'm sure. And when I talk to people about this, like, yeah, that's my family. I have that guy, I have that
Mm-hmm.
uncle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the powerful thing about well, I was going to say it's a powerful thing about movie, film, but it's really the potential power is in all creative outlets,
Yeah.
really. But um, I've seen this in my own life and my own sharing and doing this podcast and other outlets. Sometimes you just feel like you have to get it out of you. It's like a path that you're called to that you just have to
Yeah.
do, not knowing really what the outcome's going to be, but being pleasantly surprised at how much it brings out of other people.
Yeah.
And how healing can be really contagious.
Yeah.
By just sharing yourself and telling stories. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir because this is what you do,
Yeah.
But so this movie, this first film, which is so personal, right? That does sound like, you were just called to, like you had to get that out of you. It becomes what you do
Yeah.
from there on
It
out.
just, yeah, it resonated with me, and then we started. We had an idea to kind of make it into a TV series, which we are still in the process of doing. And the team, and we still had our 9 to 5s. No one had finally all the way committed for about a year, and we kept on making promo videos and a little bit, but eventually I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do. There were a couple other projects that came into fruition for some feature length documentaries that we're producing right now. Some people reached out to us and like, there's this story, and we gravitate towards it. And I was like, yeah, we need to do this. So,
Hmm.
really went full in, opened up the offices, and we're all the way in now. Yeah.
Mm. Well, let's talk about that,
Okay.
because that's a good spot for us to land. I know we're a little tight on time.
Well, let's, if we could,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel, I know it's your podcast, so I'm
yeah.
talking a lot,
That's
but
okay.
what what was your path to healing? Because you divulged some things that you had to go through, as a kid, and
Yeah.
there's some, like I said, when we start talking, we have very similar stories, no matter what they are, across socioeconomic boundaries that we put
Mhm.
on ourselves. So what was yours, and was there in a moment, because I know it's fairly recently for you, not a couple years in the making of you saying, I've got to figure this out for myself. How did that come about?
Well, and I've kind of talked about this publicly, and we've put podcasts up about
Yeah.
it. So I'll kind of be sort of brief in
Okay.
just
Yeah.
the short story, but I think I believe, and this is just where I've landed, that my worldview is everything is perfect for what it is and what it's not. And there were certainly parts of my childhood and my life that have been, terribly imperfect.
Yeah.
But they led me exactly where I needed to go at every step of the way. And so, yeah, I mean, there was, addiction and abuse and chaos and divorce and moving and, whatever else, right? Um, and it's not that I'm trying to like hide my sharing. I've just talked about it a
Yeah.
lot. And also, um, the healing part, I think you're asking about. I also see the healing being kind of a common thread that was happening all the way at very early ages. My first exposure to therapy was at 8 years old when my parents were getting divorced. And then, I discovered Wayne Dyer books on tape
Mm.
in high school, and that was incredibly healing. And, mentors and therapists and, guidance counselors and group therapy in high school. I got put in this group thing that like really made me feel not so alone. And so it was always happening. As an adult, I really went deep, into therapy and into other modalities to really get me to see myself, to really see how I was living into conditioning that was left over from what I observed as a
Yeah.
child or society or whatever. And I really started to unpack that really in the last decade, maybe 15 years now. And that just work never ends.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, yeah.
always it's part of our purpose for being here, and my what I believe at least. And so it's an ongoing thing. I'm still finding, it's like the onion, you peel it back a little bit and you're
Yeah.
like, damn, that thing's way deeper than I thought it was.
Uh,
So that's
is there a
kind of.
lot with you? And maybe you have, and I apologize if
That's
I'm not
okay,
this.
yeah.
Have you? I mean, do you struggle with the definition of what your identity should be based on expectations of you? Like, is that
No,
part of the
not
family? Have they
anymore.
let that? Okay.
I mean, I don't anymore. I mean, my identity is uh, sort of like you just described. I've kind of landed in just like being,
Yeah.
and I'm not attached to. I don't think so. I mean, I'm sure maybe subconsciously there's still parts of me, but I'm not attached to being in real estate or business or successful
Gotcha.
or a good guy or any of the things that in the past maybe I felt like were part of my identity. Now I'm just trying to like be love and the best father and husband and friend and brother and son and human being I can
Awesome.
be in
Yeah.
everything that I do. And a big part of that is continuing to find ways that I can just authentically express myself and
Yeah.
be in the world.
Just exist.
Yeah,
I
exist
mean,
and
just exist.
and and, and
It's that
exist to
simple.
try to ultimately be in service to other people.
Sorry,
So
I didn't.
that's
I just
okay. That's okay. No,
sidetracked
no,
to
no,
say.
no. I do. I just want to make sure
Yeah.
we have a chance as we start to wrap up to really talk
Yeah.
about what you're up to now, what you're
Mhm.
doing. I mean, you've been on this journey, you've been on this path. It's been
Right.
full. You've done so much work, and now you've found film
Yeah.
and this outlet that is the person that you wanted to be when you were a kid, right? That
Yeah.
you were meant to be, that you couldn't be, you didn't feel safe being or comfortable being, and now you're doing it.
Yeah.
So just talk a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, let's roll back a little bit, because I would challenge a lot of people listening, and I've always said this. this didn't, just like you would say, this just didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
And especially during COVID, like I was really appreciative of COVID because the world got really quiet. I spent a lot of time in the forest, I slowed down things, and then all of a sudden, I started really hearing the voice of the universe in my head, like explaining to me what you are supposed to be, how you will be in service in your small way to make the difference. Because none of us are, in my head when I was younger, I'm like, oh, I could be Che Guevara, I could be Malcolm X, I could change the way the world sees me as social economic. And that's not the way the universe works. You
Mhm.
follow the path. So
Mm.
when the world got quiet and that voice got loud, I started to feel that vision of I can make film, but use film as the medium for what it is the most common platform to really disseminate information to a broad audience that we have currently. And I really said, I've got to focus on the things that I see that are really bad with the human species and human condition right now, and that is healing. Really want to showcase the mental healing process, the cathartic process that the projects that we take on have a lot to do with that. And then alignment. And I found that people resonate with alignment through seeing other people's passion. So if we
Mhm.
follow people doing their passion, you see that person is seeking exactly who they're supposed to become, not just for themselves, but for their broader experience, for what they should be for the universe. I really wanted to showcase those type of projects, and then those projects started coming to me, and they
Mm.
continue to come to me, which
Mhm.
is strange. I get
Mm.
things that I had no business producing that I've helped produce that are like, wow, that was great. I just did a really powerful trans story at the start of the year that I was like, whoa, came out of the blue, had an opportunity, produced
Mhm.
it. So that's where film became part of it. It wasn't like, oh, this is for me, I can do film. It was, this is a medium for you to do what is necessary for the universe, for you to follow what we need of you at
Mm.
this point.
So cool. I just sitting here thinking how great it is that, people from your background, this you didn't use these words, but like this very macho sort of, male dominant, like angry,
Yeah.
violent world, right? A world of addiction and drugs and guns and violence and all kinds of
Mhm.
um scary bad shit, right? Like but that's a part of who you are, but you're actually now able to connect with all kinds of people that you can, like you did in college, right? Just
Mhm.
see the humanity,
Yeah,
right? See the oneness, see the
that's it.
similarities, and tell those stories. And, I just give you a lot of credit because I'm sure that it's continually healing for you, and it's tremendously healing for the subject and for the audience. And what a beautiful way to use that experience to be in the world,
Yeah.
so thank you for that.
That's what we're doing. I
Yeah.
mean, that's it in a nutshell right there, is that
Yeah.
I told my mom, when I really got into it, I'm like, if I can extrapolate all the pain input into me and output it exponentially, all of it'll be worth it
Mhm.
for me to
Mhm.
showcase the story. So
Mhm.
whatever I had to endure was exactly what I was supposed to so that I could put what I'm supposed to out there.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I can't wait to see what you keep putting out there in the
Yeah,
world, and it's good to have a chance to spend some time with
yeah.
you. Thank you for coming on the
I
podcast, and
appreciate it.
I don't know if you have any kind of final thoughts or anything else you want to share, but
Yeah, like I
thank you.
said, man, I would say if you're searching for it, that's a good step.
Mhm.
Get quiet.
Mm.
Force yourself to be quiet for about 3 to 6 months. Outside of the world, have a more disciplined approach to that, and then the universe will come to you.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brett.
All right.